Imagine being chosen by God and then sent back to the sheep. Imagine saving a nation and then running for your life. David wasn't raised in a palace. He was raised in a field. While his brothers chased glory, he chased sheep and fought lions when nobody was watching. Then one day, God chose the least expected boy in Bethlehem, and everything changed. Samuel arrived with a horn of oil and a message from heaven.
Arise, anoint him, for this is he.
And from that moment, a shepherd became a king in God's eyes. But what if I told you the giant wasn't David's biggest enemy? This is the story of how God lifts the humble and trains them for greatness.
In the quiet hills of Bethlehem, where the grass grew thin and the wind carried the scent of wild thyme, a young shepherd named David watched over his father's flock. He was the youngest son of Jesse, and in his family, that often meant being overlooked. While his older brothers stood tall and trained for war, David spent his days with sheep, guiding them to water, guarding them from danger, and learning patience under the open sky. But those lonely fields were not wasted years. When a lion or a bear came to snatch a lamb, David did not run. With the shepherd's staff in one hand and courage in his heart, he fought to rescue what belonged to his father. And when the danger passed, he would sit beneath the stars and sing songs to the Lord, songs of trust, worship, and wonder. In the secret place of the wilderness, David was becoming strong, not just in body but in spirit. One day, the prophet Samuel arrived in Bethlehem with a serious mission. Israel's first king, Saul, had turned away from God, and the Lord had told Samuel to anoint a new king from Jesse's house. Jesse proudly presented his older sons first, strong, impressive men who looked like leaders. Samuel almost thought, surely this must be the one. But God stopped him. The Lord reminded Samuel that people judge by outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. One by one the sons passed by, yet the Lord chose none of them. Confused, Samuel asked Jesse,
Are these all your sons?
Jesse hesitated.
There is still the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep.
Samuel said,
Send for him. We will not sit down until he comes.
When David arrived, dusty from the fields, youthful and unknown, God spoke clearly.
Arise, anoint him.
1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 12. Samuel poured the oil over David's head, and from that day on the Spirit of the Lord came upon David. He returned to the sheep afterward, but heaven had already marked him as Israel's future king. Not long after, war rose between Israel and the Philistines. A terrifying champion named Goliath stood on the battlefield each day, mocking Israel and insulting the living God. Saul's army trembled. No one moved. David's father sent him to the battlefield with bread and supplies for his brothers. David expected to deliver food and return home. But when he heard Goliath's insults, something burned inside him.
Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?
David demanded.
That he should defy the armies of the living God?
Men laughed at him. His own brother mocked him. Saul doubted him. David looked too young, too small, too untrained. David refused Saul's heavy armor. But David remembered the lion, the bear, the faithfulness of God in the fields. When David faced Goliath, he didn't speak like a reckless boy. He spoke like someone who knew God was real.
I come against you,
David declared to Goliath,
in the name of the Lord of hosts.
1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 45. With only a sling and 5 smooth stones, David ran toward the giant. One stone flew, struck Goliath's forehead, and the mighty warrior collapsed like a falling tower. In that moment, Israel's fear shattered, and David's name spread through the nation. Saul brought David into his court, and David served faithfully. That's where David met Saul's son, Jonathan, and a rare friendship formed. Jonathan even stripped off royal symbols and gave them to David, an act that looked like friendship but also carried the weight of destiny. David became a warrior, then a leader, and he won battle after battle. Soon the people sang in the streets,
Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000.
1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 7. The words pierced Saul like a thorn. Jealousy grew inside him, dark, poisonous jealousy. Saul began to fear David. The king who was meant to protect David started to hunt him. David had done nothing wrong, yet suddenly he was running for his life. David fled into caves, deserts, and strongholds. Around him gathered the broken, the poor, and the rejected, men who had nowhere else to go. David became their leader. Even in exile, David refused to raise his hand against Saul. Twice, David had the chance to kill Saul. First time, Saul entered the cave where David and his men were hidden. David could have ended it right there. His men whispered that this was God delivering Saul into his hand, but David's conscience trembled. He only cut off a piece of Saul's robe and later called out to Saul in grief and clarity. 1 Samuel chapter 24, verse 6. Second time, David again entered Saul's camp at night. Abishai urged David to strike once and end it. David refused again. David wasn't weak. He was disciplined. He trusted God to write the ending. Eventually, Saul died in battle against the Philistines. When David heard, he didn't celebrate. He mourned. David tore his clothes and wept. Then he spoke a lament over Saul and Jonathan, a moment that reveals David's heart.
How are the mighty fallen?
And for Jonathan, his beloved friend,
I am distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. Thy love to me was wonderful.
2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 26. After Saul's death, David didn't rush for the crown. He asked God what to do next. David inquired of the Lord, saying,
Shall I go up?
And the Lord said, Go up. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. But the kingdom was divided for a time. David waited through conflict and tension until the tribes of Israel were ready. Finally, the elders of Israel came to David and acknowledged what God had already declared.
Thou shalt feed my people Israel.
Then the promised moment arrived, so all the elders of Israel came, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 4. David captured Jerusalem and made it the capital. He wasn't building a personal empire. He was establishing a center for the nation. Then David brought the Ark of God toward Jerusalem with joy and worship. He danced with all his might, not caring how he looked to critics. David had reached the throne, but he still wanted God more than applause. David's path wasn't a straight line from pasture to palace. It was promised to waiting to testing, to victory, to persecution, to endurance, to crown. David's story is not just about victory. It's about waiting, suffering, and trusting God when your promise feels delayed.